All praise Papa Nurgle, the Lord of Plagues and Pestilence. On the tabletop, Nurgle was the Chaos God that appealed to me the most, and from the trailer, it seems his transition to the digital world will be every bit as good as I had hoped. But aesthetics alone don't make a good faction. We also need solid mechanics. So how do Nurgle's mechanics stack up? Will the great spreader of disease have all the toys we expect? The first mechanic took me a bit by surprise, with the entire concept of building up your settlements being thrown on its head. Instead of the standard construction of buildings and the upgrading of them over time as desired, Nurgle will have a system based on death and rebirth. Settlements infected by Nurgle act like weeds. They sprout, they grow, they die, and then just when you think they're gone, they sprout back up again. Now let's use the large military growth building, or garden as I shall refer to them, in the center of the screen as an example. When you gain ownership of the settlement, the garden will be at tier 1, in this case allowing the spawning of rotflies. After a while, the garden will grow and reach tier 2. Then, after waiting a few more turns, the garden will grow once again, reaching tier 3 where we can spawn a bigger, badder version of the flies. The garden will continue to grow every so often through tiers 4 up to the maximum of 8, assuming you have unlocked the tech for that tier. Once that maximum is reached, then the garden will reset to tier 1, and the whole cycle is performed again. This massive rework of how Nurgle factions access higher tier units and benefits is far beyond the scope of what I was expecting from Creative Assembly, but it's very welcome indeed. On paper, it seems like it could be a lot of fun trying to synchronize the growth of your gardens so you can gain maximum benefits when you need them the most. There will undoubtedly be ways to slow or perhaps speed up the cycle to allow you to stay in the higher tiers more often, and min-maxing your settlements and techs should prove as a wonderfully refreshing approach to empire management. Tied closely to the cycle of life and death is the spawning of units from within the gardens. Nurgle does not allow for recruitment of units in the traditional sense, but instead the player is able to spawn units directly into an army from a pool which has been filled by the player's gardens. The units spawned will not appear with full strength. Instead, they will need to replenish over time. This gives the player access to the units much faster, but requires that the player invest in casualty replenishment techs to help get their new armies fighting fit for any engagements they might have. This is another unexpected change for Nurgle, but once more fits in perfectly with his overall theme. I really like the way the developers have shaken things up for his faction, changing how we build armies and plan out our wars. Moving on to what is for me the highlight of Nurgle's mechanics, the Plague Cauldron. This is Grom's Cauldron on steroids, and almost everything I wanted from the faction's main mechanic. As we all know, Nurgle's very existence is focused on the creation and spreading of his plagues to lesser beings. He believes, as do his followers, that they are providing special gifts to the world, that those infected will be happier and more beautiful as a result. Well, Nurgle's Plague Cauldron mechanic leans heavily into that. A new screen will provide access to the Plague Cauldron, where various plagues can be concocted. There are 5 base plagues, which can then be enhanced with what appears to be 20 different effects, or symptoms. These creations are paid for with Nurgle's unique resource, infections, which can be gained from battles, dilemmas, events, and the spreading of plagues. For the 5 basic plagues we have Pox, which decreases the cycle of time for gardens and increases the growth rate of settlements. Buboes will see your casualty replenishment rate increased, while also causing increased attrition of enemy forces in sieges. Ague, which is an illness involving fever and shivering, will apply attrition to enemy armies and reduce their campaign movement range. Rot works a little differently as it does not cause infection. Instead, it will add a unit of Nurglings to your recruitment pool each time it spreads. Finally, there is Palsy, a form of paralysis with involuntary tremors, which will reduce the melee attack of enemy armies which have been infected. These different base conditions can then be enhanced with the inclusion of additional symptoms. In the screen capture, we can see that the ague plague is being used as the base, with the violent spasm symptom being added as an enhancement. This combination results in the player receiving additional infections when the plague is spread, and increases the level of Nurgle corruption in the local province. Along with these bonuses, there are the effects on the targeted enemy armies, which include all the units suffering attrition, and the army campaign movement and base weapon damage of enemies being reduced for the plague's duration. We can see that the plague will be introduced to the world via a summoned plague cultist at Fort Dolganier for the cost of 150 infections. How the summon location is determined is unknown. Does the player get to choose, or is it at random? The plague cultist is a new type of hero whose sole goal in life is to spread Nurgle's creations far and wide. They can spread the plague they are affected with to enemy armies and settlements, much like you would expect, but they can also spread the plague to friendly armies and settlements too, which in turn spread the plague themselves. So from the creation of one plague cultist, you could infect several friendly armies and settlements over several turns, and then send them out into the world. It's very a devious system, much like how Nurgle should be played. Plagues will also be able to spread through battle, regardless of if you win or lose. This means you can have small armies roaming around which you are willing to sacrifice, and push them into enemy territory just to infect your enemy's armies, priming them for your main assault. This could be a great deal of fun to bring an empire to its knees with disease. Along with the base plagues and the symptoms, Nurgle factions will also have access to recipes, which once unlocked from the spreading of certain plagues and symptoms, will allow access to the truly powerful and nasty plagues, such as Nurgle's Rot and the Black Plague. I am very happy with this mechanic, effectively taking Grom's Cauldron and dialing it up to 11. I just hope we see a modified version one day make it to Clan Pestilence, as it would be perfect for them too. As with Khorne and Tzeentch, Nurgle will come with a set of unholy manifestations. These special actions will unlock when specific levels of Nurgle corruption are reached. The actions available are Pestilent Growth, which is unlocked from turn 1 and gives a boost to casualty replenishment for a specific army for 2 turns. And of course during this time, the army will be locked in place. Blessing of Nurgle will cost 1000 Nurgle corruption and increases the chance of any plague spreading in the local province by 30% for 3 turns. Once again, the target army is locked in place for the duration. Exponential Growth will require 2000 Nurgle corruption. It increases growth in the local province by 200 and decreases recruitment costs by 20% for the target army for 3 turns. And then finally, we have Nurgle's Visitation, which will cost 3000 Nurgle corruption. After 3 turns, this will apply a random plague to every army and settlement in the same province as the target army. This sounds like the nuclear option that you'd set off in the heart of your enemy's lands, and I can't wait to try it out. Of course, as with the other Chaos Gods, if Nurgle is in ascendancy when the actions are performed, then the effects will be even greater. The final mechanic available to all Nurgle factions will be Plague Cults. These can be unlocked in your enemy's settlements by high corruption. There are 4 for Nurgle players to choose from. Shelter will generate 25 infections per turn. Refuge will generate 40 infections per turn if growth is at 200 or more. Hospice will generate 40 infections per turn if any lord is present in that region, and I assume that that's enemy lords as well as your own. And Colony will inflict a random plague upon the settlement, but the cult will be destroyed in the process. And with that, we have Nurgle's mechanics, in all their gory glory. I'm sensing a bit of a theme with the plagues, of course, and it appears that corruption is going to play a major role in infecting the world with your concoctions. I'm very happy with how these mechanics read, and I'm looking forward to trying them out for myself. I just have the issue now of who to play first. Nurgle, Tzeentch, Ogre Kingdoms or Cathay. It's a tough one for sure. What are your thoughts on Nurgle's offerings? Will you accept the warm and gooey embrace of Papa Nurgle when you first play Warhammer 3? Please let me know in the comments below, as I'd love to read your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, why not like, share and subscribe? The interaction will help me spread my own plagues to the Warhammer community, who I feel deserve the punishment of watching my content, possibly with matchsticks prying their eyes open. As always, this video was brought to you by my patrons, so I'd like to thank Hot Apple Pie, Alexander, and Solarith Magnetar. I'm Grey Tiger, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.